Hey, 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 time for another out of this world story from our space. Just as a quick heads up, this will be episode 1 of a 2-part series. The second video will be released tomorrow. Okay, now for the story. Wife cheated with 2 guys while our son was at home. I caught her. After I had a horrible incident of infidelity with my girlfriend in college, Lisa, like I said, I went on a long, tedious mission to get even with her. This was followed by years of just getting better and jaded towards women. After college, I went down to Central America, where I pretty much spent years just doing and selling drugs, never considering getting into a relationship or allowing myself to get vulnerable with another woman. I fully admit that I was an awful degenerate during this time. Well, after a few years of this, I find myself just more depressed than ever. The drugs weren't working anymore. I grew tired of having these base value, shallow, and temporary relationships with women. I decided to drop everything I was doing in Central America and come back to the United States. I called an old friend and made arrangements to move into his place temporarily until I got back on my feet. When I moved back to the USA, I decided to quit my gnarly drug habit I had developed preceding my college breakup with Lisa. It wasn't easy, but I was fully committed to giving happiness another shot. I decided to give dating another chance. I had begun to feel pathetic that I was giving up on finding someone special just because some girl in college broke my heart by cheating on me. A couple months after moving into my friend's place, I had been on a few good dates with women in the area and started opening back up to the idea of allowing myself to grow closer with a woman again. One day, I met this girl on a dating app. We will call her Kate. Kate was 25 and I was 23, who I just absolutely fell head over heels for. She had that burgundy red hair that wasn't orange but almost more of a fluorescent but natural red. She had a 3-year-old son who honestly I loved and looked kinda just like me. Kate had just gotten out of a terribly abusive marriage and was in a very similar position as me. She also just went through a period of grief and a bad drug habit. She had just cleaned herself up and was ready to try dating again. This worked well for both of us because we both completely understood each other's emotional state and were able to allow one another to proceed slowly and not expect too much out of each other. We both had fears of commitment and trust issues and were still a little emotionally fragile due to our past relationships and drug habits. Besides this, we had so many things in common. Kate even said she felt like she was dating the male version of herself, and she liked it because we allowed each other to be completely authentic. As the months rolled on, we grew closer and closer. Me and her son got along, and he even called me Dad. He was too young to remember his biological father, and I was the only other father role he's ever had in his life. The day I taught him how to pee standing up on a tree sealed the deal for me, and he was my son from that point on. I got a job at a finance firm, and Kate worked at a nightclub. Things were going well, and we moved into an apartment together, bought a car together, and were in the process of trying to buy a house. We were going to get married and have a kid of our own. We only smoked weed occasionally, and felt like we had fully recovered from our past drug addictions and emotional wreckage. We both crawled out of the depths of real darkness and found some peace and happiness together. Or so I thought. Me and Kate never had any jealousy or suspicions with each other. We fully trusted each other. We never went through each other's phones, and we knew each other's passwords and login info to everything, so we never had any issues around trust with one another. Until this happened. Typically, I would get up early in the morning before I got ready for work to walk Kate into the apartment from the parking lot because she wouldn't get home until after 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning from work, and it was a bit of a sketchy walk. The club typically was only open until 2 a.m. most days, but recently started staying open until 4 most nights of the week. Or so Kate told me. One morning, Kate said she was leaving work a little later because she had to drop a friend off at her house. She told me this only like 5 minutes before she would ordinarily arrive home. It usually took her about 35 minutes to get home from work, so I found it a bit odd that she told me so last second, and I knew where her friend lived, so it may have only taken an extra 5 minutes to drop her off on the way to our place. She ends up getting home about an hour later than usual, and something seemed a bit off. She looked high, not on weed, but it struck me as if she was on coke or Molly. I briefly confronted her about this, but she brushed it off quickly and said she was late because her friend's car broke down and they tried to get it fixed, but couldn't. That's why it took so long to get home. This was the first time in almost a year that anything like this happened, so I quickly pushed down my suspicions and chalked it up as me being a bit paranoid because of my past experience with infidelity and dishonesty. I told myself Kate would never do anything sketchy. She had been through the same thing I went to, and she knew in full detail my story about the last relationship. She would never do anything like that to me, especially since it happened to her too. I wasn't even that suspicious of her cheating or anything. I was more suspicious that she was doing hard drugs again. Slowly but surely, incidents like this started happening more frequently. First, like once a month, and eventually led all the way up to happening almost every week. There was a few nights where I was almost positive she was high on drugs, and we fought about it. She finally admitted one day that I thought she was high, that she did half a line of coke once because she was tired and needed to pick me up to get to work, but that was all she did. At this point, she was coming home at 5, 6, or even 7 a.m. some mornings regularly. Her club closed at 2 or at 4 a.m., depending on what day of the week it was. She always had excuses like the car wouldn't start, she would go to her friend's house after work to smoke weed, or she went to a Waffle House with some of her coworkers after their shifts. But then, one morning, her text messages seemed severely suspicious. She wouldn't respond properly, and it really seemed like she was forcing herself to sound genuine when texting me. She was doing the, "I'm going to be home a little late" dance with me again, but this time, it really dragged on. She told me she was on her way at 6 a.m., 2 hours after the club closed. So at 6:30, I went outside of the parking lot to walk her in when she arrived. It was snowing heavily outside. There was a blizzard going through the area. About an hour goes by and I hear nothing from her. I text and call her over and over. She doesn't answer the phone, but I get a message from her saying she's almost home. Another hour goes by before she finally pulls up into the parking lot. The time was 9:30 a.m. I had to call out from work because I couldn't leave her son home alone. I usually left for work at 7:30. I'm completely covered head to toe in snow. I walk up to the car and open the door. Kate looks at me like she had seen a ghost. As she begins rambling nervously and almost incoherently. She says she got pulled over but was let go without a ticket. The car ran out of gas, so she had to stop to fill up. Her friend was having a mental breakdown, so she stayed with her for a while to help her after work. She even started blaming me for things like saying she wouldn't have gotten pulled over if I got the registration done sooner. Yada yada yada. Thing is, she could have told me this by texting me or calling me at any point during all of this. It was all very suspicious. The whole time, she won't shut up giving me very inconsistent stories while we were on our walk into the apartment. I can't help but notice how dilated her pupils are and how she is visibly grinding her teeth. Obviously, I was very angry at this point, but I was so exhausted and cold from standing outside for hours and worrying about her. I temporarily let it go and tried to distract myself with some video games. I was convinced she was doing cocaine at work or after work. What else was she up to? Who was she doing cocaine with? Just her coworkers and friends? Is she doing other drugs? Was she cheating? I was only mildly worried that she was cheating. I was more concerned about her drug use. We both had our runs in the past with them, hence why we only smoked weed nowadays and occasionally had a drink. We weren't sober or anything like people in a 12-step program, but we tried to keep it very mellow. Her lying about the drugs was even more concerning to me than the actual drug use, because it was triggering my trauma from my ex Lisa, who lied to me and cheated on me in college. I literally was at the point where I didn't even care if she did the drugs. I just wanted her to be honest with me. I couldn't stand the thought of being in another relationship where my girlfriend was lying to me about anything. My mind began to spiral. I felt completely betrayed. Me and Kate helped build each other back up after our tumultuous pasts, and now we had wonderful lives. I never thought she would lie to me about anything. We had such an open book, trustworthy relationship, and we never had experienced any problems with this type of stuff before. I got obsessed with trying to find out if she was lying about the drugs. I needed undeniable proof. The next day, when she left for work, I tore up the house, looking for something. I had no idea what I was looking for. A bag of coke? Some pills, maybe? I went to every drawer, every nook and cranny of every piece of furniture, coat pocket, on top of the cabinets, anywhere she could hide something. I found nothing. I tried to convince myself I was just being paranoid. My PTSD and insecurities about my past relationship were triggering me, and I was just getting obsessive with trying to find something that wasn't there. I decided I would stop trying to find out if she was lying, because if I was wrong, my behavior could ruin a good relationship. I thought Kate would never lie to me, or even worse, cheat on me. She had a horrible experience with her ex-husband cheating on her while she was pregnant, and he also hid a drug problem from her. So I couldn't imagine her doing the same thing to me that her ex-husband did to her. So I let things go. She came home at normal times again for a while. This calmed me down a lot. I began to feel bad for my paranoia. Until one night, I'm at a local pool hall playing at a table with a random guy. We will call him Jerry. And while me and Jerry are chatting, I mentioned my girlfriend works at the club's name. Jerry's sister, Sarah, was hanging out with us while we played pool. Said she worked at the same club a couple months ago. I asked her if she knew Kate, and she said she did, but they weren't really that close. They mostly knew each other in passing. I then expressed that I wish Kate had a day job where we could be home together more at night when I got off work. I tell Sarah that since the club typically closes at 4, I would only see Kate for about an hour or two before I left for work in the morning. Sarah then looks at me confused and says, "I thought they closed at 2 a.m. When I worked there, we only closed at 4 on Friday and Saturday nights." I tell Sarah, "They changed the hours after you left." Sarah then tells me that her roommate still works there, as she never mentioned the closing times had changed because she still comes home just after 2 during the week. It got awkward fast, but I shrugged it off and finished the game of pool. After the game, I went home and I couldn't get what Sarah told me out of my head. I looked up the club Kate worked at, and indeed, it said they were only open till 4 a.m. on Friday and Saturday nights, and 2 a.m. every other night. I again convinced myself that they must not have updated the times on their website yet after they made changes or something. Deep down, I knew Kate was up to something, but I was so scared of being lied to again after years of avoiding relationships for that exact reason. I was in full-fledged denial. The next day was a Sunday night. I texted Kate and asked her when she would get off that night, and she said she would be home at 4:30, and she would text me when she was on her way. So at 2:30 a.m., I called the club and asked if I could speak with her. It was about her son. The manager answered and told me they had closed at 2, and Kate already left. I felt like I was going to throw up. I decided I was going to confront Kate. I don't know when she came home that night because I ended up drinking until I passed out and didn't go out to the parking lot to walk her in. When I woke up, she was asleep next to me. I got up and went into the living room where I saw her purse sitting on the coffee table. I picked it up and started going through it. At first I didn't find anything, no drugs or anything shady else that would throw me off. Then I noticed tucked away in one of the small zippers, I found an empty dime bag and rolled up dollar bill. Is this what I have been looking for all this time? I just put it down on the coffee table and went to work. I was hoping she would see it and know that I found it. When I came home, she was getting ready for work. She was in front of the bathroom mirror doing her makeup, specifically her eyeliner. I lean up against the door and look at her through the mirror. She looks up and says, "Hey babe, what's up? How was work?" I guess she didn't see that I found the rolled up dollar bill. I reply with, "Hey, we need to talk about something." I proceed to tell her that I called the club and they told me they close at 2 on Sundays. She immediately ignores the entire topic of her lying about what time the club closes and proceeds to scream at me for being controlling and obsessive and not trusting her and having no right to call the club in the first place. It didn't faze me. I had made sure that I wasn't just being paranoid. What she was doing was grade A gaslighting, which I was well experienced with because of my previous relationship. The fight continues to escalate. I accuse her of doing cocaine behind my back and lying to me about her drug habit. I call her a coke whore, and that's when she turns around and swings at me with her eyeliner. I turn in reflex, and she lodges the eyeliner pencil about 1.5 inches into my shoulder. She then proceeds to punch me about 6 times in the face. I don't react or hit back. I was mostly just in shock. Once she finished beating me and screaming, we both just stand there staring at each other. I pull the pencil out of my arm and drop it at the floor. I walk out of the bathroom and into the kitchen where I get some duct tape and patch up the hole in my arm. I have a tattoo right where she stabbed me and I still have a nice, healthy scar there to this day. I leave the apartment and I start my walk to the liquor store. Kate is blowing up my phone. She was doing the whole thing where she is apologizing, and when she doesn't get a response, she begins throwing insults and then repeats the cycle over and over. I buy a bottle of Fireball whiskey and proceed to walk and drink and walk and drink. I eventually black out and wake up to none other than the Jeffrey who I played pool with the other day and some other guy I didn't know trying to pick me up out of the snout. They put me in their car. Apparently, they were on their way to work and saw me fall and not move on the side of the street and pulled over to make sure I was okay. Today, I wonder where those guys worked because it must have been super early in the morning. I was walking for hours at that point and probably blacked out long before I fell. I had finished the whole bottle of whiskey very quickly. When I was in the car with them, they asked me what was going on and why I was walking around at that time of night, that far from the town. I could barely talk. It felt like my lips were frozen. I was able to tell them where I lived and they dropped me off at home. When I go inside, Kate is shocked and tries to get me to lay down and get me warm. I blacked out again shortly after and wake up in a pool of vomit in my bed. I get up and take a shower and go out into the living room where Kate is sitting on the couch crying. We begin to talk. She apologizes for stabbing me with the eyeliner pencil, and she admits that she had started doing coke again and was going to her co-worker's place. A few of them lived together in an apartment. They were all females, and she would do coke with them before coming home. She first started doing it to help her get through work, and it just kept escalating. I asked her if it was just coke or if it was other stuff too, because there were some nights where she seemed like she was more than just coke. She admits every once in a while she took a Xanax to take the edge off the coke before she came home, but she did this rarely. We ended the conversation civilly, and she promised to stop doing drugs and lying to me about where she was and that she would never hide anything from me again. But now that I knew she was capable of lying and keeping these from me, I was a bit more on my toes with things than usual. Okay, that's it for part 1, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow with episode 2 to finish the story. Stay tuned.